Hello friends, my name's Emile and welcome back to some more Forza Top Gear laps. Today we are covering DLC cars, more specifically DLC cars from the October car pack, November car pack and December car pack. Admittedly those car packs weren't particularly good, however thanks to the last car pack being halfway decent, I've finally managed to compile a list of 7 cars to go around the Top Gear test track today. I've picked the most interesting cars and, to be honest with you, the quickest, because most of the road cars from the last couple of packs have been relatively slow classic cars, so I've tried to go with sort of some of the more modern and quicker cars. Anyways, the first car to go around today is the Cadillac XTS Limo. 304 horsepower, £5,500 of weight. Now, the Cadillac Limo is a bit of a strange one. You see, 304 horsepower and it's front wheel drive. It's also a limo. This is the first limo in Forza. Now surprisingly, to drive the limo doesn't feel nearly as big as it actually is. You can't really feel what the rear end's doing in this car, however that's not a problem because of the front wheel drive. Speaking of front wheel drive, 304 horsepower is actually a pretty damn decent amount for a front wheel drive car. I mean, the only other front wheel drive car I can think of that has more power is the Honda Civic Type R, the brand new Civic Type R, which we don't have in Forza yet. But that's 4 more horsepower than we got out of the Ford Focus RS, and to be honest with you, the limo actually handles its power relatively well. I think that might be due to the large amount of weight. That probably helps sort of keep the understeer and so on in check. However, the limo does handle its power pretty damn well. Probably about on par with the Ford Focus RS, the Mark II RS, which was also a pretty decent car when it came to handling its power. It certainly isn't quick. I think that also helps out in the sort of understeer department, as it's sort of the same with the brakes. I don't know if the brakes are any good, because it's, you know, it's a very slow car. It doesn't really take much to get it stopped. But that being said, the limo wasn't terrible, I guess, so across the line it goes. Next up we have the Infiniti Q60 Concept car, 400 horsepower, £3,650 of weight. This is a car I've been wanting to throw around for a little bit now, because this, if it ever went into production, would sort of be competing with the BMW M4 and the Lexus RCF, both of which have gone around the Top Gear track. Now, on paper, statistically, 400 horsepower, I believe that is the least amount of either of those two cars. So the M4 I believe is about 430 horsepower, Lexus RCF is about 470. So the Q60 is down on power. Weight wise, £3,650, it's about in the middle. The M4 I believe weighs £3,300 and the RCF weighs £3,900. So it'll be interesting to see how the Q60 gets on. As far as the drive, it doesn't drive anything like the M4 or the RCF. The Q60's most defining characteristic is probably its snap oversteer. This, it handles relatively well until you start pushing it a bit too much, and then all of a sudden the rear end will just snap out on this car. You know, it doesn't really give you much warning that it's going to do it, it just sort of does it. And that means this is a very interesting car to drive. Not as nice as the RCF or the M4, but still okay, I guess, and it's across the line. Next up we have the Holden Torana A9X, 216 horsepower, £2,520 of weight. We haven't had any classic muscle cars go around just yet, so the Torana is sort of the first classic-y muscle car to go around. And to be honest with you, well, it handled very much like a classic-y muscle car. First thing you'll notice, you probably saw it into that corner, was the massive amount of suspension lean. This has a very soft suspension, it's a 70s car, of course it does. I assume it's running leaf springs as well, so yeah, not the most sophisticated suspension system in the world, so it does lean and roll and wobble about. Also, this car does have a tendency to get slidey. Now, it is quite fun, admittedly, however, that's not conducive to a good lap time. 216 horsepower actually means this is the least powerful car of the day. However, £2,520 does make it the second lightest car today, which is pretty good. So, the Torana, all in all, was okay, I guess. Not what I would personally select to drive around the Top Gear track. Admittedly, it is a bit down and outclassed when it's sort of compared to other cars that have gone around here. As far as where we're looking at this car to end up, I'm not really sure. We haven't had any classic American muscle cars, so I'm expecting this to go around sort of the sporty super minis, so it'll be interesting to see what sort of time this is set, which we'll of course look at the end. Next up we have the Plymouth Prowler, 253 horsepower, 2,838 pounds of weight. The Plymouth Prowler actually really surprised me. When I did a build on this car, I put a NASCAR engine in it, and it was actually very, very nice to drive. So, what was it like stock? Well, I'll tell you, it's very, very nice to drive. 253 horsepower is about the same as we'd get from a hot hatch, and 2,838 pounds is actually a bit less than you'd expect from an average hot hatch. So on paper, it's already looking pretty good. And then you get to the handling, and my god, this car is it's got such good handling, this car. It really has. It's, for an American car, it doesn't have any understeer, doesn't have any oversteer. It's very nice, it's very controllable, it's very laid back, is the way I describe it. It doesn't really get stuff done hastily. It definitely isn't the quickest car in a straight line, but it's very, very easy to drive, and it's nice. I will admit the gearbox is a bit dodgy on this car. For some reason it's only a 4-speed auto, so, you know, as much as you can manually change gears in Forza, it is still a 4-speed gearbox. It didn't ever get to 4th gear, but I just figured that was something worth pointing out. But yeah, the Prowler was actually really, really nice to drive around here, which did surprise me actually. I wasn't really expecting the Plymouth to be that nice to drive stock, but it was. Next up we have the Holden Commodore SV, or more specifically the Holden Commodore, I think it's like SS Group A SV, I don't know, we're just calling it the SV. Anyway, 241 horsepower, 3,120 pounds of weight. Again, another car I did a build on, so I wasn't really sure how this car would handle stock. To be honest with you, it isn't the best car to drive stock, however it is a hell of a lot of fun. This really is actually quite a fun car to just chuck around and play around with. 241 horsepower means this is the second least powerful car here today, along with the other Holden. However, it only weighs 3,120 pounds, which for a 4-door car actually isn't that bad. As far as its sort of driving characteristics, well, it is a bit wallowy. It is an 80s muscle car, so again, that's sort of to be expected. The rear end will come out on this car. It's very controllable when it does, but it will come out on this car. Understeer, not really. It doesn't have the power to sort of make understeer an issue, so yeah, the Commodore just about gets away with it. Pretty decent car to drive overall, a massive hoot to drive. Probably not the best race car per se, unless of course you tuned and tinkered with it. But as far as, you know, driving a car around for fun, yeah, this is certainly a nice, fun little car to drive around, similar to the Mazda MX-5 and the Golf Mark 1, probably the third most fun car I've ever had to drive around here. Next up we have the Mercedes-AMG C63 S, 503 horsepower, 3,968 pounds of weight. Now we've had the Mercedes-AMG GTS go around before, and that actually set a relatively disappointing lap time, so I was kind of curious to see what the C63 would do. Now, on paper, the C63 has exactly the same engine. I believe it is actually exactly the same engine, makes the same noise and everything. 503 horsepower, fairly reasonable amount, not as much as you got out of the old car, the old Black Series car, more specifically, but still a hefty amount. 3,968 pounds, though, makes this the heaviest car that isn't the limo here today, so it is a heavy, heavy car. This, and you really can feel that when you drive this. This feels like a big, heavy car to drive. I don't actually know why it weighs so much. I don't understand it. Again, this probably will be quicker than the RCF and the M4 and so on, just because it has got a bit more power than those cars. Straight line speed was very, very good in the C63S, as you would probably expect. This is a very, very quick car. And yeah, not my favourite car to drive. I definitely struggled with it. I don't think I'd be ever using this against stock. I wouldn't recommend it, but it isn't terrible. And finally today, the Ferrari 250 LM, 315 horsepower, 2,094 pounds of weight. As you saw there, this car actually takes an absolute age to get off the line. This has a dodgy, racy gearbox. This didn't get out of 3rd gear during its entire lap round here. First gear is also fantastically long. It goes to like 90 miles an hour in first gear. It's incredible. Anyways, the Ferrari 250LM is the lightest car here today. And on paper, 315 horsepower, 2,000 pounds of weight. This should be a very quick car, and it was. Once, you know, you sort of got over the crap gearbox, this really was a very, very quick car around here. It handled quite nicely. Admittedly, it might be a bit too light. You know, you can see it sort of drifting a bit there. But yeah, the 250LM was a very, very good car to drive. Once it got going, straight line speed was relatively decent. You could take a good amount of speed through the corners. It did actually remind me of a Lotus quite a bit. So yeah, the 250LM was very, very quick, very fun. Could take a decent amount of speed through the corners as well. For an old car, this handled really, really well. You see it taking that second to last corner there really, really quickly, and last corner again relatively quickly as well. Onto the times, and the 250LM is the fastest car here today with a 120.340, narrowly beating a 99 Viper. AMG C63 S 44th, 121.267, slightly faster than a C5 Corvette, but slower than a Fast and Furious S2000. Pretty decent time overall. The Infiniti Q60 Concept goes into 50th with a 122.494, placing it squarely between the BMW M4 and the Lexus RCF, as you would expect. So that's pretty good. My predictions were correct on that one. The G60 was overall pretty decent. Next up, the Plymouth Prowler goes into 73rd with a 127.373, beating out a Mitsubishi GTO, a Ford Focus ST. Yeah, it's with the hot hatches, which is quite surprising actually. That was a really, really nice to drive car, that one. Next up, the Holden Commodore goes into 81st with a 128.726, beating out a GT86 but being beaten by a Clio V6 Escort Cosworth. It was a bit too wayward, I think, the Commodore, but still good fun car to drive. The Holden Torana goes into 91st with a 132.606, and the Cadillac Limo goes into 95th with a 138.176, making it one of the slowest cars around here. But, you know, for a limo, it handled itself pretty well, let's be honest, and the Torana didn't do too bad either. Anyway, friends, that is going to be it for today's video. Next episode hopefully will be out within the week, and it's either going to be creator choice cars, so my favourite cars, or it's going to be American cars, and we'll get some classic muscle cars around and stuff in that episode. Anyway, friends, I want to thank you all very much for watching. My name's been The Real Emile. Until next time, farewell.